Charlie watched as another fly sizzled in the bug zapper. It was time for another belt of scotch. Michigan in the summer was possibly one of the worst places on Earth. Certainly the worst Charlie had ever had the misfortune of being trapped in. Outside was hot, muggy, a simmering 98 degrees. Inside the offices at WDDT it was about the same, only a few degrees warmer. The only thing that made it bearable was the sack of crushed ice Charlie had shoved under his ass. Well, that and the scotch, he muttered to himself as he uncapped the bottle of Dewar's. Charlie took a hard swig. The taste of distilled regret burned his throat. In the lower right of his computer monitor, a clock counted seconds, minutes, hours. For Charlie, it was a personal metric of sorts. An ever-present reminder of the quantity of life he'd so far wasted behind a desk, sweating like a pig, keying in ad spot schedules into a decrepit machine that should have been taken out back and shot years ago. 3:32 p.m. Another 5.5 hours to go. Then it was home, back to a nagging wife and another bottle and, most probably, a night on the couch in front of the TV. Another fly crackled to its death inside the zapper. When Charlie had graduated from USC, this was not the career he'd envisioned for himself. A degree in broadcasting should have taken him anywhere he wanted. Of course, a booze-fueled night of internet webcams and sex with a rich producer's jailbait daughter has a way of killing careers and marriages in one spectacular go. Now, 6 years later, here he was on wife number 2 and managing a local cable station in Tranquil Bay, Michigan. Population 21,543. God damn it if Charlie didn't loathe this place. It was a fishing village mostly. A grid of no-frills urbanization slapped onto a stretch of coastline at the base of the big lake. The reek of dead fish was inescapable. In the air, on the water, even the people. Everything stank like week-old sardines under a supermarket heat lamp. But that wasn't the worst part. No, Charlie's own personal hell was that everyone knew who he was. He was Charlie Foster, the TV man. Charlie, the almighty bastard who ran commercials for Tubby's Liquor Mart, and that white-haired guy who promised, "Now is the best time ever to invest in gold." Charlie, who decided which episodes of Hee Haw aired, and went to interrupt programming to announce that Pat Riggs' psychotic pit bull had again gone missing. And if a dumb yokel took issue with a rather risque episode of I Dream of Jeannie, it was Charlie they blamed. Or if someone got taken in by yet another gold scam, it was Charlie who received threatening calls in the middle of the night. No one had yet shot up Charlie's house, but he'd been frightened enough to install steel shutters and an alarm system. And then, of course, there were the old bats at the grocery store. Prune-faced biddies who harassed him constantly about how badly Ricky treated Lucy, and insisted Charlie do something about the trampy clothes the girls were wearing on Gilligan's Island. Can't spend your whole life crying about mistakes, Charlie grumbled to himself. He thudded the bottle onto the desk and sank into his chair. Faux leather and half-melted ice crunched under his ass. That's why the good Lord invented liquor. He used to say that damn near every day back in college. Sort of became a mantra of his. Whenever Charlie pissed off a girl, blew a test, or got one of those, "We're so disappointed," calls from Mom and Pop, he'd always remind himself to just keep drinking and carry on. Of course, nowadays, that old mantra stung a bit. Charlie stared blearily past his desk. The scotch was making it difficult to focus. Across the room, the on-air monitor caught his eye. Wilbur was on, juggling knives again. Guess it could be worse, Charlie muttered, watching the clown drop the knives and transition into a wiggly jig. I could be that sad son of a bitch. Wacky Wilbur. Wilbur the clown. Wilbur, his fucked-up brother-in-law who needed a job, so Charlie obliged. Made him the host of WDDT's afternoon clubhouse show. In truth, it made perfect sense, Wilbur being a true-to-life trained professional of the clowning arts. He was a Ringling Brothers graduate, after all. He'd even spent 2 years with Princess Cruises as an on-ship entertainer. That was until customs busted him for smuggling. If it had just been drugs, the courts might have gone easy on him. But no, Like everything about Wilbur, normal wasn't good enough. He had to go one step beyond.
To the edge, dude! To the frickin' edge!
And in this case, the edge meant hooking up with a wealthy collector who had a Jones for cultural artifacts. The bag of high-grade hash cops found shoved up Wilbur's ass was almost an afterthought compared to the 2,000-year-old statue and ceremonial dagger he'd stuffed into his oversized shoes. Prison hadn't been kind to Wilbur. After a 5-year stint at Big Sandy, well, a clown with a prison record takes work where he can find it. On screen, Wilbur had broken into song. Thankfully, the sound was muted. He shuffled around like a giant penguin, arms stiff, feet together, head bobbing in bird-like pantomime. Every time he opened his mouth, the stage lights gleamed over purple gums and the chrome glint of a studded tongue piercing. The camera cut away, panned across the audience. They were local kids mostly, what Charlie lovingly called the inbred spawn demographic. They laughed like rabid jackals, screaming and waving and baring gnarled teeth. One of them spat at the camera. It could have been a scene from Lord of the Flies. Back to Wilbur. Holding a cane now, he'd gone into a frenetic soft shoe routine. Then the fish hit him. A rancid trout. Someone off camera had hurled the thing at him, and with considerable force. It didn't look planned. Wilbur was sent reeling head over clown shoes right into the cardboard backdrop. "Yep," Charlie said. "There's always somebody who's got to swallow a bigger dick than you." Under the scorching tungsten lights of Soundstage 2, Wilbur could feel the white of his grease paint begin to run. The stink of dead trout was all over him. A taste of fish goo on his lips. The damn thing had chinned him, but good. Knocked him smack into the Ether Island set. Now he was on the ground, entangled in what had been a scene of confetti sand beaches and smiling stone heads. The audience howled wildly. They were out of control today. Bloodthirsty even. Whatever. The little dudes were going to lose their shit eventually, Wilbur reminded himself. Control was an illusion. Wilbur kicked his legs, flexed his back, shot up like a spring. In a blink, he was on his feet. If there was one thing every clown knew, it was how to take a fall and get back up. Wilbur made it look easy. He turned to the cackling mob beyond the stage, felt their rabid hostility. They weren't an audience anymore. These kids were a lit fuse, ready to blow. The frickin' heat had only made them worse. Wilbur arched forward and shot them a crooked sneer.
"Dude,"
he barked, fists raised. His voice sounded like cigarettes and cheap candy.
"If you're gonna bring me fish, frickin' cook it first!"
The tension broke. The cackling jumped 3 octaves. A wry smile eased across Wilbur's lips. He had him. The twerps were laughing with him again, not against.
"I'll tell you this,"
he said, dipping down to scoop up the fish.
"You little butt nuts are off the hook today. I think old Uncle Wilbur is gonna have to step up his game."
He rubbed the trout across his ass, tossed it back into the audience.
"There you go, autographed and everything, dudes."
Suddenly, the low moan of a canned foghorn cut in. Wilbur jumped.
"What? Oh, frick me, dude! You hear that?"
The audience fell to a hush, their yellowed eyes wide with anticipation. Wilbur cupped a hand to his ear. The foghorn blared again.
"Yeah, it totally is, dudes! That's the call of the Octopus King!" "Yay!"
The kids erupted into a yapping cacophony, spewing cheers, cries, screams, and tears of pious devotion. The most zealous of the crowd rushed the stage. Unable to climb the 5-foot rise, they took to pounding their tiny fists against the plywood supports. "Answer the call! Answer the call!" some chanted. Others simply yelled, "Octopus King is the awesomest!"
"Well, all right then,"
Wilbur shrugged.
"Let's not keep 'em waiting. Let's go!"
The Octopus King, the old man in the sea. Wilbur had introduced the character about 3 weeks ago. Already the king was a fan favorite. More popular than Rhonda, more popular than Fishface. He even got more love than goofy Mr. Guggs. Like most of Wilbur's ideas, it had come to him as a dream. Well, many dreams, actually. That and a fair amount of hash. Late at night, when he'd collapse into bed and allow sleep to finally take him, Wilbur would find himself wandering the corridors of a fantastical place. A place beneath the waves, where reality was jumbled, and everything looked like that Iron Maiden album, the one with all the weird statues and shit on the cover. From the very first, Wilbur knew where the dreams were taking him. To the domain of the old god, the one who fell to earth and built a city upon the water. The god who was betrayed by the stars and tricked into a long, deep slumber. One day he'd rise and give the world what Wilbur had already found: enlightenment. It was the one thing Wilbur brought back from Thailand that the feds couldn't confiscate. With their gloved hands and shock wands, the assholes in the yellow vests had stripped Wilbur bare, searched every orifice. The fuckers had even pumped his stomach. But some things cannot be seized. They could never take away those long nights Wilbur had spent in the jungle with Boon Liang and Su Xin. He'd taken the dream walk. He'd tasted the dark. That had been part of the deal. Wilbur needed to experience the miracle before the freak twins would hand over the goods. When Wilbur found the twins outside that Bangkok club, they'd assumed he was just another dumb tourist, another American dweeb itching for a hint of danger. They were so sure he'd turn chicken and run. They didn't know Wilbur. 6 nights of weird drugs and sex, chanting and fucking under the full moon, amongst the ruins of an Ayutthaya temple even? What's not to like? It was total Apocalypse Now shit, like being Colonel Kurtz for a week. By the end of it all, Su Xin had even given Wilbur a wicked tattoo. All words and thorny symbols. An invocation of power, she'd called it. Sacred images that evoked gnarly spirit juju. Maybe the tattoo is what did it. Pried Wilbur's third eye wide open. Or was it the blood wine? Did it even matter? The dreams were coming on their own now. No rituals needed. No voodoo liquor required. At first, he'd had to swallow about 1/5 of the stuff before the magic happened. Boon Liang would rub him down with ashes while Su Xin poured shots. Wilbur wasn't sure why they even called it wine. The drink was mostly rum and cobra guts, and some other shit. Mescaline, probably. Strong enough to make a grown man shit himself, that was for sure. Now, 6 years later, and some 8,000 miles away, those dreams had become more real than reality itself. So persistent, so powerful were they, Wilbur was compelled to give them shape, form, so he'd built his own castle under the sea.
And we're going down, down, down.
Wilbur jogged over to a darkened patch of stage. Lights flicked on, a sickly green. Then curtains parted to reveal a scene of blue cardboard panels and hanging rubber fish.
All the way to the very doorstep of where our wet friend lives.
And there it was, the castle in all its glory. Its 4-foot spires and glitter-coated walls shimmered under a neon blue spotlight. Wilbur had constructed the thing mostly from junk he'd found behind the studio. Wood planks, styrofoam blocks, a pile of rusted drywall screws. There was even an old distributor cap somewhere in the mix. Hot glue and nails held it all together. At a glance, it looked like the worst dog house ever. Or maybe something an 8-year-old would hammer together for his imaginary pet dragon to live in. The kids loved it. The sight of the Octopus King's keep always sent them into hysterics.
So here we are, right? Totally beneath the ocean. And this...
Wilbur took a step closer to his creation, knelt down beside it.
This is where the great and mighty Octopus King hangs out.
Wilbur batted at a few stray bubbles that drifted under his nose, then leaned in to knock on the door.
Yo, dude! You around or what, man?
Wilbur hollered. More bubbles wafted past, getting caught in his stringy green hair. Behind the keep, a machine gurgled, choking the bubbles out like a leaf blower with a head cold. Wilbur knocked again, this time harder. The giant nautilus shell above the door rattled.
Dude, the kids are here to see you, man. They've come all the way from nowhere, Michigan. Isn't that awesome, dude? King? King?
Wilbur stood, then turned to the audience.
I don't know, dudes. I don't think he's in. No!
The kids howled in unison.
You're doing it wrong! You're doing it wrong!
What wrong? You're saying I'm messing it up? Wilbur feigned exaggerated confusion. I don't think so. If there's one thing old Uncle Wilbur knows, it's his way around seafood. Don't worry, you'll get that when you're a little older.
No! You need to wake him up!
Wake him? Dude, it's totally daytime. I don't think so.
Wake him up! Wake him up!
Their squeaky little voices rose into a chant, feet stomping with each word. Occasionally a lone shrill cry would cut through, screaming,
He wants to awaken!
Wilbur laughed, shook his head.
So, maybe you're right. But there's only one way to wake an octopus, and that's to...
Over the in-studio PA, a jaunty music box melody began to play.
Sing! Deep down in the bubbling blue, there lives the Octopus King. He came to Earth long, long ago, but then he fell asleep. The water bubbles because he snores, but he likes it when we sing. Join me now in this song. Let's sing to the Octopus King.
On cue, the kids heeded the call to join in. Standing on their seats one by one, they began to yap the words and mimic the dance Wilbur was performing. A sort of slow spinning jig with head held high and hand twirling. Finally, the music box tune sputtered to a close. The audience fell silent. Wilbur turned, looked to the keep. The Octopus King was still a no-show.
Well, dudes, I just don't know. Maybe the king is hungover or something.
The audience sparked up, all 53 child voices squealing together.
No! You forgot the last part! Oh, wait, you're totally right. Yeah, dudes, we need to sing the song in octopus words now. I totally forgot that he can't speak
The music kicked in again, this time a little louder and faster. Without missing a beat, the kids started up before Wilbur could even finish.
Venglui magona fakathulhu, Rilye waganagal fatagan, Ningai, Ngaga, Bagshagagyaha, Cthulhu fatagan, Cthulhu fatagan.
Cool